In the solemn chambers of the U.S. Senate, the tension was sharp enough to slice the silence. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana rose from his seat with the gravitas of a man who had seen too much government waste and could no longer hold his tongue. His southern drawl was steady and deliberate as he approached the podium, his eyes scanning the room like a hawk circling its prey. He wasn't here to be polite. He was here to call out Representative Jasmine Crockett, by name, by deed, and by every contradictory word she'd uttered against the backdrop of growing debt and misused taxpayer dollars. Crockett, a rising voice, in the Democratic Party and a frequent guest on late-night talk shows, had made headlines once again. Her recent tirade on the House floor painted President Trump as a billionaire con man, scoffing at conservative attempts to rein in government spending. But Kennedy wasn't having it. With the sharpness of a bayou blade, he countered with biting sarcasm. The spirit of wasteful spending is alive and well in D.C., and it's got a fan club. Miss Crockett seems to be the president. The senator didn't just speak in figures. He painted vivid scenes of reckless expenditures, a $20 million Sesame Street program in Iraq, $10 million to groups linked to Al-Qaeda in Yemen, and millions more funneled into gender policy advocacy in countries most Americans couldn't find on a map. Do you know what Big Bird is doing in Baghdad? Kennedy asked, shaking his head. Neither do I, but I know it's not worth $20 million of hard-earned American dollars. Though Representative Crockett wasn't present in the chamber, Kennedy addressed her as if she were seated right across from him. He called out her support of extravagant budgets masked as justice-driven aid, slicing into her positions like a surgeon peeling back layers of deception. She says it's about justice. I say it's about politics dressed in glitter. And America's tired of paying. For the costume, Crockett, known for her fierce sound bites and sharp media presence, had accused Trump of avoiding accountability over a private jet and mysterious crypto transactions. But Kennedy flipped the script, arguing that while Crockett pointed fingers at Trump, she ignored billions being sent overseas with little oversight or explanation. With each new number he cited, the Senate chamber grew colder. No one laughed, no one interrupted. Kennedy was saying out loud what many feared to whisper. He didn't stop at policies. Kennedy spotlighted real Americans, the people footing the bill for what he labeled ideological experiments. He spoke of Maria, a single mother in Dallas scraping by on 2 jobs, of James, a welder from Shreveport who once wore the uniform of the U.S. military, of Sarah, a retired teacher trying to survive inflation on a modest pension. Their taxes, Kennedy claimed, were funding DEI programs in Serbia and LGBTQ campaigns in Jamaica, instead of paying for better schools, safer streets, or affordable medicine. The senator's speech morphed into a passionate indictment of Crockett's political showmanship. He mocked her infamous Trump or trans game on Capitol Hill and challenged her obsession with televised performances. She wants Trump to take an IQ test, he said. I suggest she take a crash course in the federal budget first. The room burst into quiet chuckles, but Kennedy's face stayed solemn, driving the point home. One of his strongest punches landed when he brought up the $4.7 trillion missing from federal accounts. That's not a typo, he thundered. That's theft, bold, unapologetic, and protected by silence. He demanded to know why Crockett, so eager to scrutinize Trump's travel expenses, had never launched a crusade to find out where trillions of American dollars had vanished. Then came the challenge, the kind that lingers long after the cameras stop rolling. Kennedy extended an open invitation to Crockett, a public debate, televised and raw. Come explain to the American people why Sri Lanka needs gender-neutral journalism, while Maria in your district can't afford a decent school for her kids. It wasn't just a rhetorical jab. It was a dare, one backed by facts, figures, and the fury of forgotten taxpayers. Kennedy didn't hold back on the elite either. He questioned how public servants like Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden became multimillionaires on modest salaries. How does that math work, Miss Crockett? He asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. Because the folks in Louisiana sure don't buy it. He painted a picture of Washington as a place where truth is buried under bureaucracy, where televised justice overshadows real accountability. Miss Crockett is busy building a resume on TV, he said, while Americans are building lives with no help from the programs she's defending. He pointed to the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, legislation Crockett supported, as further examples of big promises that delivered only inflation and debt. As Kennedy's speech neared its crescendo, he stood tall, his voice a storm, battering the walls of indifference. We need an audit, a full-blown investigation of every agency wasting your money, from USAID to Fort Knox. We deserve to know if there's still gold in there. The Senate chamber seemed to exhale in unison, as if releasing the tension Kennedy had built like steam in a kettle. Some lawmakers clapped. Others stayed motionless, their faces pale. Kennedy's words weren't just political barbs. They were a national rallying cry, an invitation to shake the foundations of government waste. As the air settled in the Senate chamber, Senator John Kennedy leaned forward with a steady gaze that burned through the room's silence. The facts, the figures, none of it was abstract anymore. He had brought it all down to earth, into the homes of Americans who were tired of being taxed to fund projects they never approved, never benefited from, and in many cases, never even heard of. Now, Kennedy's tone changed slightly, less like a prosecutor, more like a neighbor speaking hard truths over a backyard fence. He spoke directly to Representative Jasmine Crockett. Whether she was present or not didn't matter anymore. The message was clear, and the entire chamber was now an unwilling witness to the verdict. Kennedy turned his attention back to the national debt, his voice rising with the force of a freight train. $36 trillion, he repeated, like a funeral bell tolling in the background of every family's paycheck. That's not an investment. That's a chain around the ankles of every single working American. He blamed administrations, past and present, Obama, Biden, and the lawmakers who supported them, for stacking bricks on the financial backs of citizens while masking it as progress. Then, looking directly at his colleagues, he demanded they stop pretending this was normal. He spoke of Miguel, the immigrant small business owner from Houston, scraping together rent and payroll while Washington flushed millions into DEI seminars in Macedonia and inclusion programs in Thailand. Miguel doesn't need equity in Bangkok, Kennedy said bluntly. He needs a tax break. He needs a city that won't tax him into the ground while giving his money to nations he's never been to. With each example, the faces in the chamber shifted, some nodding, others averting their eyes as if Kennedy's words had found their targets. Kennedy followed with the story of Emma, the combat veteran living in a crime-ridden neighborhood of New Orleans. She fought for this country, came home with scars, he said, his voice thick. Now her tax dollars are buying condoms for Ghana, while she doesn't even have working streetlights on her block. The contrast was brutal, the logic impossible to defend. He let the silence sit for a moment before asking Crockett again, "Can you look Emma in the eye and tell her that's justice?" Then came the hammer blow. The $4.7 trillion missing from federal accounts. "This isn't an accident," Kennedy said low and sharp. "This is corruption hidden behind red tape, behind political speeches, behind smiling faces on TV." He didn't accuse Crockett directly of theft, but he accused her of silence, of playing defense for a system built on lies. "You say you care about truth," he said. "Then start with this. Where is that money? Who took it? And why are you not asking the same question?" He turned once again to the spending ledger like a preacher flipping through scripture. He recited figures with venom: $3.9 million to teach inclusion in Macedonia, $1.5 million for LGBTQ advocacy in Jamaica, $8 million to rebuild the media ecosystem in Cuba. "These aren't just numbers," he declared. "They are insults. Slaps to the faces of Americans who wonder why they can't afford groceries while someone else gets a diversity workshop in a country they can't spell." Kennedy's frustration shifted into a challenge that echoed off the chamber walls. "You want to talk about justice, Representative Crockett? Then talk about Maria in Dallas, who's raising 3 kids and can't afford childcare. Talk about James in Shreveport, who fought in uniform but now fights to pay his electric bill. Talk about Emma, Miguel, Sarah. The list of names had become his army. Real people he invoked like armor against the bureaucracy Crockett so fervently defended. He jabbed again at Crockett's media presence, this time calling it a distraction from the real pain of working. Americans. TV isn't real life, he said. You can wear fancy clothes and speak in poetry on Colbert, but that doesn't build a road, feed a child, or save a family from foreclosure. Then came a flash of the Kennedy humor, that sharp Louisiana wit. If Miss Crockett wants to play budget games, I've got a new one, waste or fraud. Let's guess what each line item really is. His sarcasm faded into solemnity as he turned toward the heart of the problem, the systemic enrichment of politicians while the people bled dry. How do public servants making $200,000 a year retire with $50 million? He asked, staring into the rows of polished seats. That's not service, that's a scheme. He named names, Obama, Pelosi, Biden, then turned the question again toward Crockett. And you, Miss Crockett, you want to investigate Trump over a jet? Let's investigate. Your silence while billions disappear. Then came the most powerful invitation of the day, a challenge not laced in sarcasm, but in raw sincerity. Kennedy offered to meet Crockett in public, in front of the American people, for a televised debate. No spin, no makeup, just her and him, explaining each dollar spent overseas while American families scraped by. Come tell the people why Sri Lankan journalists needed gender lessons more than our veterans need health care, he said. I'll bring the facts, you bring the truth, if you can find it. The moment rippled through the chamber. Some senators shifted, as if considering the merit of the proposal. Others stared into space, silent and stiff. But Kennedy didn't. Wait for approval. He pushed further, calling on Elon Musk and Trump's team to lead independent audits of every agency in government. Let them shine the flashlight in every dark corner, he said. We'll see what runs for cover. He warned that Americans were running out of patience. They aren't ATMs for bad ideas, he said. They're parents, veterans, dreamers, builders. And every dollar stolen from them is a betrayal of the promise we made when we took office. With one last breath, he raised his voice and laid down his final line. Miss Crockett, this isn't about left or right. This is about right and wrong. You can stay in the spotlight or you can stand in the truth, but you can't do both. As he stepped away from the podium, the Senate remained still. Some whispered, some clapped. Others looked like they'd just come face to face with a mirror they didn't want to see. But one thing was clear. Kennedy hadn't just confronted Jasmine Crockett. He had confronted the system itself. And for the first time in a long time, it blinked.